Warning. The following video has scenes that are not meant to be taken seriously and are stated entirely in a tongue-in-cheek manner. Viewer and lawyer discretion is advised. Picture, if you will, the most obscure game developer you can think of. Hell, comment telling me what it is, because the name I'm about to give you I can guarantee, or can almost guarantee, is more obscure than that. You ready for this? Here it goes. Synthetic Dimensions. Do I win? I think I do. So what is Synthetic Dimensions? Well, first of all, it's a really awesome name, but it's also a small game developer from the 90s, which I've been eternally fascinated by. It's one of those cases where a developer that could have very easily simply been a go-nowhere developer that came and went and made a few games I happen to have played ended up being intriguing because of a lot of weirdness surrounding the company. But a lot of that weirdness may potentially be from the company itself being weird, or it may be because of a lot of missing pieces as far as archiving information, leading to weird speculation on my part. So bear with me as I let my mind wander for about 20 minutes. So, Synthetic Dimensions was a company based out of Wolverhampton, England. It was started by veteran game developer Kevin Bulmer and his partner, whose name I will not be mentioning because this person is still alive and I don't want to cause any unnecessary foot traffic in their direction. Allegedly, the company began in 1985, but they wouldn't actually officially be credited with making anything until at least 1990, but more likely 1992. According to Moby Games, they're credited for 6 different games: Legends of Valor, Rapid Assault, Druid, Daemons of the Mind, Chronicles of the Sword, Perfect Assassin, and Ed Hunter. Now, how did I find out about this company? Well, of course, me being me, it was through their final game, Ed Hunter, that I discovered them. I'm a big Iron Maiden fan. I would say they're among my favorite bands of all time, though I'm no longer confident in saying that they're my favorite band. But anybody who's even tangentially aware of Iron Maiden will instantly recognize Eddie the Head, the most iconic metal mascot of all time, and it's not even close. Well, he's the subject of a little game called Ed Hunter, which was a pack-in game to the greatest hits collection of the same name in support of the tour of the same name. It was a really terrible rail shooter game, starring Ed Hunter having to chase Eddie the Head through all of space and time, all areas themed around various Iron Maiden album covers, only to find himself facing the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a goofy premise worthy of a goofy bunch of Englishmen. There's definitely a novelty to it, but having played it, it's really poorly made, and even for its time was ugly as hell. Beyond the novelty, it's maybe worth one playthrough if you're a fan. The only redeeming part of this game is the soundtrack, and that's because the soundtrack to this game is obviously the greatest hits of Iron Maiden, and also Tailgunner. It's one of those cases where you wonder why a band as big as Iron Maiden would choose a developer like this to make a game like this. Well, I believe it's because Steve Harris is a low-key, a very proud Englishman, and always insists on having things close to home. Either way, this was my introduction to Synthetic Dimensions. I didn't even pay them any mind at the time when I first played this game. Then I came across their work once again a while later. I was visiting a friend in New York ages ago, and we decided for some reason to road trip around, doing a bit of a retro game store run as an excuse to see the sights. And we stopped in this little town called Troy, New York. We visited a retro game shop there, at which point I found a game called Chronicles of the Sword. The cover immediately grabbed me because it was published by Psygnosis, and as you'll know from the previous video, they're a company I always looked out for, because good or bad, their games were always at least interesting to talk about. I remember saying as much at the time, and this is one of the worst games I've ever played. This game is set in the Arthurian mythos, and you play as a guy named Gawain who has to venture out into the world to defeat Morgana, King Arthur's half-sister, after she attempts to assassinate King Arthur. It's an absolutely glacially paced point-and-click adventure game with really basic presentation, weird character designs. Seriously, why is Merlin in a suit and tie half the time, and the other half of the time he looks like Shang Tsung? CGI cutscenes that ran at like 2 seconds per frame, zero actual gameplay, pixel hunty puzzles, the same ear-splittingly annoying musical loop playing ad nauseum, and really, something about it just looked like a fake game. Chronicles of the Sword is a game that I keep coming back to as just something that's so ungodly fascinating for how appalling it really is. But unbeknownst to me, this was a game that was also made by Synthetic Dimensions. Suddenly, I really wanted to see what else this company was responsible for, because we were 2 for 2 as far as fascinatingly terrible games. Of course, they're not all terrible. They made Legends of Valor, or to give it its full title, Legends of Valor Volume 1: The Dawning. Kind of overconfident to name it Book 1, but never mind. This actually is considered to be one of the grandfathers of first-person medieval fantasy games. It was an epic fantasy quest where you could explore an entire world, and it had a lore all its own, where you have to rescue your cousin Sven, slay a demon, and rescue the king. Basic in the grand scheme of things, but this was epic for 1992. While the MS-DOS version was maligned for its poor performance and lack of atmosphere, the Amiga version was the cock of the walk, at least as far as reception was concerned. Unfortunately, it was a relative flop. Despite that, though, it was one of Todd Howard's inspirations for the Elder Scrolls. So it has a surprisingly big legacy in that respect. After that, they made Druid, Daemons of the Mind, Demons. It's like demon, but with like an A between the D and the E. I'm not sure if that's pronounced demons or daemons. A game set in the world of Navon, involving one of 4 different brothers who rule over 4 different islands going missing, and so they enlist the grandson of a great druid to help find him. It was a clunky game with an identity crisis, considered too much of an action RPG to be a good point-and-click adventure game, and too much of a point-and-click adventure game to be a good action RPG, so it reviewed poorly and sold just as well. The next game was Rapid Assault, a first-person shooter crossed with a police simulator. That's basically all I know about the game and all I could find out about it because it's so obscure, very little documentation about it exists. But the fact that you are a police officer in a futuristic setting is pretty much the entire story, as you go around shooting and arresting criminals. The final of the 6 games they're definitely known for having made, if not chronologically the last, is Perfect Assassin. Definitely in the Chronicles of the Sword School of game design as far as slow-moving point-and-click adventure games. But this one at least had better presentation. In this, you take control of a synthetic interplanetary assassin named Charon, who lost his memory pursuing a key target and has to regain his memory and fulfill his duties. It's pretty interesting in that you have a gun you can shoot anytime during gameplay, which can be used to solve puzzles, but you also have to be careful about who you shoot, lest you kill the wrong person and end up with the death penalty. So that's it. That's the entire catalog of Synthetic Dimensions, a cavalcade of mediocrity that most of you probably haven't played. So what is it about this company that fascinates me? Well, the first thing that really fascinates me is the specific timeline of games that they made. Based on what I can tell, Legends of Valor was the first game undisputedly credited for them. But what's weird is, the Wikipedia page credits them for a bunch of things they absolutely did not make. Home console ports of Gauntlet 1 and 2, Golden Axe, and Terminator 2, among other games. Whereas if you look into the creation of all these different games, none of them have any sort of credit given to Synthetic Dimensions. With that said, however, I did look into it, and while the games don't necessarily credit Synthetic Dimensions in themselves, they do however credit Kevin Bulmer. You can easily find his name in the credits of all these games, so I believe whoever wrote this Wikipedia article tended to attribute Kevin's work on these games to the entirety of the company he ran, which is not helped by something I'll cover in a minute. According to Moby Games, the first game the company may have worked on was actually Corporation in 1990. A first-person shooter that actually predates Wolfenstein, but while he's credited for graphics and game design, it was actually core design that made the game, along with the support of a company called Dementia. A company so nondescript I can't even find any info about them whatsoever. No documentation, no websites, no articles, nothing. With that said, however, Dementia may play a bigger role in this tale. I did find a Moby Games page on Dementia, and what games are they credited for? Well, they're credited for various ports of Terminator 2, Corporation, Golden Axe, Galaxy Force 2, and Hot Rod, all games allegedly made by Synthetic Dimensions, at least 3 of which Kevin Bulmer was involved with, and I did verify that this company did in fact work on these games. Like for example, Dementia was one of the support companies for the Amiga version of Golden Axe. So perhaps certain games attributed to one company were accidentally attributed to another company. Maybe Synthetic Dimensions didn't actually open in 1985. Maybe they opened in 1990 or 1991 after the closure of Dementia. Maybe Dementia was the precursor to Synthetic Dimensions that Kevin Bulmer and his partner opened, and maybe it's one of those things that nobody ever got around to documenting, or perhaps somebody's trying to take credit for somebody else's work because Dementia is such a forgotten company. And there's no way to know because Dementia is a company that has absolutely no information on it internet-wide, other than that Moby Games page, of course. It's also a hard company to research because it's not Dementia Games, Dementia Interactive, or whatever, it's just Dementia. But since there's no info on it, there's no way to know for sure. So perhaps I found an even more obscure developer than Synthetic Dimensions. Is it ironic, or is it fitting that a company called Dementia has been forgotten? But if I had to guess without my tongue in my cheek whatsoever, gun to my head, I would speculate that Dementia was a precursor to Synthetic Dimensions. Because Kevin Bulmer definitely worked at both, so that might be able to explain the weird credit attributions. I mean, he worked on those games, and it's not like anyone before me had corrected the fact that the wrong company was being credited. Once you move past these specific games and look into the company history, that's where things start to get really weird. In the history of the company after Ed Hunter, you want to know when the company allegedly closed down? 2012. That's right, this company allegedly closed down 14 years after its last noted project, and ostensibly only closed down because of the death of Kevin Bulmer in 2011. But between 1999 and 2012, there was a strange amount of activity going on, even though no products were being released. The company went public, twice on 2 separate platforms, only to go private in 2002, then after that, nothing until 2012 when the company apparently closed down. So I'm wondering, did the company actually stay around for that long? Or did it close earlier than the article says? Because if there's nothing happening between 1999 and 2012, a full 13 years of nothing being released, I have no choice but to assume there was some nefarious shit going on. You know what kind of companies stay open for 14 years without any business? Fronts. Fronts for money laundering. Matter of fact, why would a company go public not once but twice in 3 years only to do a stock buyback 1 year later? I'm not accusing them of anything, but I'm just throwing this out there. Private companies don't need to publicly declare their revenue. Public companies, meanwhile, do. So hypothetically, if the company did a stock buyback and went private after going public, they could have theoretically had an easier time laundering money through the company without anybody knowing. I'm just saying most companies can't survive that long on their own. Then you have to take a look at these awards they allegedly won or almost won. Small Business of the Year award? That sounds about as legit as Montgomery Burns Award for Outstanding Achievement in the Field of Excellence. But I did my research and found there is an award show specifically about small businesses in the UK, and there's even a specific award for the West Midlands where Wolverhampton is. Unfortunately, the website doesn't give me any specifics, and the award show on various social media only goes back as far as 2016. I'm not sure if this is actually something that existed in 1998. The website is no help because they don't display past winners. I actually reached out to them and asked if I could have a list of all previous winners, but they told me that I could find the previous winners on the website. No, I can't. That's why I reached out. So that's inconclusive, but what's even weirder is that Kevin Bulmer was apparently a semi-finalist in the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award back in 2000. You can usually only find a list of the winners from 2001 onward, which I thought was an indication that the awards only went as far back as 2001. But it actually goes back as far as 1986, and there was indeed a winner in 2000. I found out it was some guy named Keith Cratch, but you know what I couldn't find any info on? The semi-finalists. There's no public documentation that tells you that they were as close to getting the award as they were. So perhaps the claims that they were close to winning that award are fabricated, or alternative theory, we visualize semi-finalists as being the top 4 and the finalists as being top 2, but that's not necessarily the case in an award show like this. A semi-finalist could very well be the thousands of people who entered the contest, while the finalists were the 8 people selected to potentially win. It's not like they're doing a single elimination tournament. It's kind of like how you could argue every eligible movie is a semi-finalist to get the Oscar, but only the 8 or so nominations are the finalists. They also claim to have won an Innovation Award at the 1996 Consumer Electronics Show. Now, which one, the winter one or the summer one, it doesn't specify. But either way, I looked at multiple archiving websites, I looked at multiple videos on the topic, and not a single trace of this company can be found on anything. So once again, it kinda comes across like it was made up. I will acquiesce though, this one seems the most legit out of all of them because this type of 3D animation in 1996, yeah, I could see that actually being somewhat groundbreaking enough to warrant an award. By the way, isn't it convenient that the 3 awards they claim ownership on have no public documentation referencing Synthetic Dimensions as either winning or possibly winning the award? Am I saying they made it up? Am I saying they exaggerated their claims? I'm just asking questions. And here's another thing that may have been outright made up. The Wikipedia page specifies that in 1999 they were listed on OFX, a British stock trading platform, and were listed as being worth £11 million. And then in 2001 they moved to AIM, another entirely separate stock trading platform, and were listed as being worth £15 million. but I can't seem to find any documentation on this being the case, so once again it comes across as a trust me bro situation. But I will admit to not really knowing much about stock trading, and my question is, if their last publicly released project was 1998, how could they go public in 1999, and more to the point, how could they go public again 2 years later and be worth significantly more? I wanted to find any info out on whether or not they ended up on the stock trading platforms they claim to have been part of. I mean, first of all, you have OFEX, apparently an unregulated alternative to the London Stock Exchange. It was apparently popular amongst small businesses and risky ventures, but I can't find any documentation of it existing past 2004, when apparently they had some financial difficulties. Then there's AIM, the alternative investment market, another alternative to the London Stock Exchange, and after some research there, I can't find any info about them on AIM either. But I will give them some leeway on this front. This was from 2001, so it's entirely possible that it was never published to the internet, because that was back when companies didn't feel the need to put everything on various websites. But either way, the inconclusivity of this research does leave the door open. Maybe they were on these stock exchanges, maybe they weren't, who's to say. And then there's the surviving member of the duo who apparently started a new company after Synthetic Dimensions closed down. And I tried visiting the website, but the website doesn't exist anymore, if it ever existed to begin with. I went to this person's LinkedIn page to find out what they've been doing, and the company alleged to have started after Synthetic Dimensions closed down, redirected to a completely different company on LinkedIn, and I tried to visit their website, but that website doesn't exist either. I also tried to look up the company on Google Maps, and the location is apparently some alleyway somewhere. But it's apparently still operating according to LinkedIn, so I have several questions. Did the company rename itself at some point? Is it still in operation? Was it ever in operation? Does the surviving member of the SD duo even exist, or is it like a Tyler Durden thing? Of course, I don't know enough about these circumstances to even begin to jokingly speculate. All I can say is there is so much weirdness surrounding this company and its successor companies. And all for what? All for a couple of not very good games? Okay, let's back way the hell up, because while I can joke all day about money laundering, embezzlement, and people not actually existing, let's get serious, because in reality, one of two things happened. Either Synthetic Dimensions actually closed down many years before the Wikipedia article claims, and the Wikipedia article is wrong, or the company stepped away from video game manufacturing and started working on other aspects of graphic design. There's a brief blurb on the Wikipedia article that says that for the 1998 Ed Hunter tour for Iron Maiden, they also worked on graphic design for merchandise and memorabilia for the tour. Apparently they didn't just make the game, and that makes me think that may have actually been the direction for the company after 1998. That is, unless the Wikipedia article is lying about multiple aspects of the company. In which case, that would be a weird conspiracy where somebody just decided to make up a completely fake history for this random small British company. So all things being equal, I'm willing to bet that after 1999, they simply moved away from game development and spent the next 13 years until the company's eventual closure working on either small nondescript graphic design projects for various companies, or they were working on projects that they weren't explicitly being publicized for being involved in. It's entirely possible that after 1999, the company's history functionally ended because there was nothing worthy to historically preserve after that. And you know what? That appears to at least partially be the case. First of all, I found an interview from Kevin Bulmer in 2008 that seemed to imply that the company was starting to pursue other avenues in 2000. And he had stated their intentions to get back into the gaming industry, but they never did, as Kevin Bulmer would pass away only 3 years later. Although despite his passing, 3 years is a long time, so presumably there must be some half-finished game out there he was working on. But maybe that was a lie, and to be quite frank, it wouldn't be the first time he lied in this interview. Particularly when he himself insisted that Synthetic Dimensions made 14 games, all of which were top 10, 9 of which were number 1. This would be in line with what the Wikipedia article states, but that's complete crap. First of all, Kevin seemed to have bought into this idea that him working on these games meant that he could attribute them to his own company, probably just to sound impressive in interviews and make his company seem bigger than it actually was. But either way, he didn't develop 14 games for this company, he developed 6. He may have made 14 games in his career, but his company only made 6. And even of the 14 games he claimed the company made, number 1 sellers by what metrics? Number 1 of the week, month, year? Number 1 game among people named Stan? Number 1 game among people for companies called Synthetic Dimensions? What are we looking at here? Because by any metrics, several of them were definitely not top 10 sellers. Several of them barely sold anything to begin with. But either way, in this interview, he brings up some other alternative business ventures they went into after they stopped pursuing video games. And there definitely were some different business ventures they went into, only further proven when you look into the now defunct website that's thankfully been preserved on the Wayback Machine. Once again, they continue to push the idea that they sold 9 best-selling computer games, and this company's history page on the website matches the company history page on the Wikipedia articles, so now we know for a fact that the company's history was written by the people in the company itself. But either way, through this website, which was apparently still running as late as 2018, we can see that they offered holographic 3D imagery, graphic design, web design, and so on. Although if your website looks like this, I wouldn't exactly be offering web design services. Either way, along with these services, they also had examples of their work, like whatever the hell this is supposed to be. But there are still a few things that don't necessarily sit right with me about the company, even now that I've narrowed things down a bit. First of all is the fact that everything from the Wikipedia article is basically directly copied and pasted from the website. So all the stuff that happened, well, we really only have their word to go on that it actually happened. And given that we know for a fact that they're lying about how many games the company made, we can't say for sure how much of this is true. Second of all, even on their website, some of the stuff doesn't really appear to be copacetic. Like Astronauts, a TV show that apparently never made it off the website, but it's presented on the website like a big deal, or CyberSlam, a TV show which was in a perpetual state of coming soon. And when you try and look up CyberSlam on Google, the only thing that comes up is an ECW event. So other than this one blurb on the website, there's no proof that it's something that actually existed or was ever finished. I don't know guys, still seems pretty sus. Either way, what this whole thing comes across to me like is a company padding its stats, probably for the sake of investment. Because there's so many aspects of this company's history that are verifiably exaggerated at best. And sure, there are quite a number of things that aren't necessarily disprovable, but there's also not anything to necessarily prove them either. It's just he said, she said. And because of this lack of info, I'm left to speculate endlessly about this because there's no way to know, and even once you get past all that, there's still so much weirdness surrounding this company that's hard to explain. I feel like I'm having to correct real-world continuity trying to figure this out. Did the company actually open in 1985, or did they open in the early 90s? And if they did open in 1985, what specific projects did they work on between 1985 and 1992? Why is the company credited for multiple games they didn't work on both websites that acknowledge their existence? What happened between 1998 and 2012? Did they actually get these awards they claim to have gotten? What happened to the successor companies that Kevin Bulmer's partner made? What does that Dementia company have to do with all this? Why did they go private in 2002? Were they ever public to begin with? I think it's fun to joke around about this sort of thing, but it's probably a combination of factors that led to a lot of this weirdness. I do personally think there was some lying on the website, and that combined with the weirdness surrounding the successor businesses led to a coincidental combination of factors that makes for good speculation and joking, but isn't anywhere near as nefarious as one may be able to joke about it being. Just whatever you do, take this video for what it is, a mostly tongue-in-cheek look at a really weird company with a really weird history and a really weird back catalog of games, with a little bit of genuine speculation. This video is being written only a few days after the Karl Jobst lawsuit outcome, and so I do feel like I'm living a bit more on a razor's edge now with the things I say. So as much fun as it is, I don't want to be sued. And whatever you do, don't let this video come across as me downplaying Kevin Bulmer's accomplishments. Despite whatever weirdness surrounding Synthetic Dimensions, he absolutely did work on all these games that he claimed to have worked on, and several of these games were incredibly big deals. I mean, Gauntlet, Golden Axe, these are not small properties to have worked on. And he definitely was a pioneer in a lot of ways. He made the graphics for a 3D first-person shooter in 1990. How insane is that? So all joking aside, let me be clear that there is no disrespect to the dead intended here. This is all in good fun, and I implore you not to seek out any surviving members of these companies. That's all I've got. If you like this video and want to support the channel, you can like this video, leave a comment telling me what you think, subscribe, and hit the notification icon so you're always up to date on what I'm doing. And if you want to support the channel in a more direct fashion, you can pledge to my Patreon for unique perks and rewards such as early access, Discord benefits, and exclusive content along with these fine folks right here. And an extra special thank you to Dick Kickham, Ga004, Hydra Overlord, Farmcat84, Raph, Ranger X, Sphinx, Weird Webster, and Will Stokes for going above and beyond. Elsewise than that, I've been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends.
You